In this Baldur's Gate 3 video, I'm going to be showing you 3 early game Cleric builds. 2 of these are single class builds, 1 is a multi-class build, and I'll be going into why that is in this video. I'm not going to go through and do a build for every subclass since there are 7 domains of Cleric, but I do want to show you some early game ones that absolutely devastate. So first up is 6 levels of Tempest Cleric, and what I really like about this build is it really allows you to focus on wisdom. You're going to be casting spells most of the time. Be able to crank wisdom. You don't really have to focus too much about strength or dexterity. You can use heavy armor if you want. You can use any weapon you want. Early on in the game, you might be using some weapon attacks until you gain more spell slots. Once you gain Call Lightning, this is really where things open up for this build. That's at level 5. And because you can cast this every turn, as long as you maintain concentration without using more spell slots, you're going to be able to use it as like your primary attack pretty much constantly in combat. We've taken the Warcaster feat at level 4 in order to give us advantage on concentration saving throws so that we can keep this up every possible turn. And there are a few things I really love about this build. Because you can use heavy armor if you want, and you have a shield because you have shield proficiency as a cleric, you're going to be able to have fairly high armor class even from the very early goings of the game, which is going to allow you to avoid damage. That's going to help keep your concentration up, obviously, because you're going to have less concentration saving throws to be made. But it also makes enemies come up and attack you because you can position yourself like on the front lines if you want as a frontline character. Enemies will come up to you, they'll miss quite often. But when they do hit you, you're going to be able to retaliate with lightning or thunder damage as well, every reaction once per round, which is really, really good in my opinion. It's a decent amount of damage. And you're going to get more out of that than you would attacks of opportunity because enemies don't normally run up to you to melee and then move out of the range and go attack something else. It does happen sometimes. It's not very common. But enemies do come up and attack you, and when they hit you, you're going to be able to respond by dealing damage to them, which is great. And this build has a good amount of AoE damage between Thunder Wave, between Shatter, between Call Lightning. There is a lot of AoE here, allowing you to deal a lot of damage each turn. And because of the Channel Divinity ability of the Tempest Cleric, you can make sure that this does maximum damage twice every short rest. Because we're a level 6 Tempest Cleric, you're going to gain that extra Channel Divinity charge at level 6, which is one of the reasons I really wanted to go up to level 6. And that's going to allow you to use that twice per short rest, which means you can get maximum damage like in one fight twice. That's huge with, AoEs. That's going to allow you to just wipe out groups of enemies like regularly, and then you can short rest between combats, do it again on the next combat. Absolutely devastating. And also at level 6, you gain Thunderbolt Strike, allowing you to push enemies backward when you hit them with thunder or lightning damage. This isn't the most useful thing, but sometimes enemies are positioned right near a cliff or something, and you can knock them off by dealing damage to them, which is great. A lot of times you're just going to kill them outright, but this is another reason to go to level 6, in my opinion. Moving forward with this build, you could take 5 levels of Circle of Land Druid in order to gain Lightning Bolt, in order to give you another option for, your spell casting that kind of does a very long straight line of lightning damage that would work well, especially when you use the Channel Divinity ability. And that would still give you access to like a lot of spell slots that you could upcast some of these spells at. So you'd still be very, very strong in my opinion. And you could take 1 level of something else like Fighter, for instance, in order to gain a fighting style like Defense to give you an extra armor class and second wind. Or you could take Monk in order to allow you to add your wisdom to your armor class when you're unarmored. Those are both really good options for this build as well. And the next build I want to show you is 6 levels of Light Domain Cleric. I really like this build because like the Tempest Cleric, it's very offensive. It allows you to focus more on fire, whereas the Tempest Cleric focused on like lightning and thunder. Light Domain Clerics have a huge focus on fire, and you have a lot of fire-based spells. And you're probably going to want to pick up Elemental Adept and take fire at some point in this build to help you overcome fire resistance and immunities, and also to make it so that you can't roll 1 on your damage rolls for your fire spells, so your fire spells in general will deal more damage. And because we go to at least level 5 here, you're going to gain access to Fireball, which is a fantastic AoE, and at level 6 you gain an extra spell slot. So you'll actually be able to throw 3 fireballs before you have to long rest, giving you a lot of good AoE with this build. And another thing I really love about this build is that level 1, you actually gain Warding Flare, which allows you to impose disadvantage on an enemy that's going to hit you in combat once per turn. And you can do this every turn. So that means that you're going to be pretty tanky for a spellcaster because it's pretty likely that an enemy is going to miss you if you put a disadvantage on them, particularly during the early goings of the game. And once you get to level 6, you can also use this on nearby allies should they be attacked and they're going to get hit. So you're going to be able to use this basically like every enemy turn, prevent some damage to your party. So it's really, really good at mitigating damage your party's going to take. So you have a lot of offensive firepower with your fire spells, but you also have this kind of defensive feature that you're going to trigger like every round once you get to level 6. And the channel divinity of this domain allows you to do a radiant damage AoE that hits enemies that are in line of sight. Like if they're behind something, it won't hit them. But it does decent amount of damage, although in my opinion it falls off kind of later on in the game. But it's still a decent one, and it doesn't hit friendly targets. So like if you're in the middle of a bunch of enemies and friendlies, you don't have to worry about hitting your friendlies. And I would take this build up to at least 9 levels of Light Cleric in order to gain Flame Strike and Wall of Fire and stuff like that. That's going to give you even more fire spells at your disposal, particularly a lot of damage if you have something like Elemental Adept, as I mentioned before. So you'd probably want to take it up there. Then you could multi-class with like 3 levels of something else in order to like pick up some martial things, maybe like Monk or maybe like Fighter or something like that. And the last build I want to showcase is 5 levels of War Domain Cleric and 1 level of Fighter. And I would highly recommend that if you're going to do this setup, that you take Fighter first and then 5 levels of War Domain Cleric. That's going to give you proficiency with Constitution, which is going to greatly benefit your concentration saving throws. Have a lot of spells that use concentration, so that would help you a lot to kind of reverse the order of classes. And this is a really, really devastating build. That's like a proper hybrid in my opinion. You can deal decent damage in melee or at range, and you can also cast devastating spells. And because you have War Domain, your bonus action you can use to attack with a certain number of times. It's 3 times at level 1. At level 5, it's going to be 4 times. So a good reason to get to level 5 here, so you can get that extra charge in between long rests, and you can attack as a bonus action if you attack with your main action 4 times in combat. But you also have heavy armor, medium armor, light armor proficiency, shield proficiency. You have all weapon proficiency, so you can use whatever you want. Highly recommend using a shield, either like heavy armor, medium armor with higher dexterity, and a finesse weapon, so that when you go into melee combat, you are very, very protected. And you can use something like the Spirit Guardian spell, which is absolutely devastating, that casts an AoE around you, that hits enemies, and when you move into enemies, it damages them. And then at the start of your turn, it damages all enemies around you. So you can tank, you have very high armor class, you can melee while enemies are sitting inside this, and it's just going to deal tons of damage to them. Like, just stack your armor class, sit there, and deal damage to them every round. Move into them, attack them with your regular attacks and your bonus actions in between those hitting them. It's very, very strong in my opinion. The only thing is that you have to maintain concentration on Spirit Guardians. So obviously taking Fighter first helps with that, to give you a proficiency bonus to your concentration saving throws. If you took something like Warcaster, that would help even more. That allows you to really get in the middle of enemies and not have to worry as much about your concentration being broken, because you are going to get hit. You're going to be attacked often if you're playing like a tanky character, and that's okay as long as your concentration doesn't break. But this also allows you to use a lot of other things, like you can use Sanctuary to protect yourself if you need to. You can use Healing Word to heal yourself as a bonus action if you want. You can use Guiding Bolt to range down enemies, or you can use Inflict Wounds if they get up close to you because you're going to have high wisdom. There's just a lot of things you can do. You can use Second Wind to heal yourself even for a little bit, which is nice. You can keep Bless up very easily to keep Bless on your group if you want to do that. There is a lot of versatility in this build, and it's extremely deadly early on in the game. Moving forward to this build, I would probably take like Fighter up to level 5 in order to get you extra attack, and then finish taking War Domain up to like level 7 to give you a few more spell slots that you can use some of these spells in and just deal even more damage. So that wraps up our 3 early game builds for the Cleric class. We will have some proper builds coming. We are going to be moving on to companion builds, because I know a lot of people have been wondering about that. We did one already, but I want to get those done, and we'll continue to mix them in with other guides and proper endgame builds as well. As always, if you have other tips for players that I forgot to mention, please leave them in the comments, and if you have questions, leave them there as well, and I will answer them as soon as I can.